My name is Emily. I was 31 years old when I got married. I grew up in a small town where people knew each other, neighbors borrowed sugar from one another, and family gatherings were usually loud enough to be heard from the street. My mother, Linda, was the gentle one in our family. She was patient. She listened more than she spoke. She was the kind of woman who could tell something was wrong just by looking at your face. My father, Richard, was different. He was serious. He worked hard. He believed children needed discipline, and he believed fathers should be respected. When I was little, I thought he was the strongest man in the world. He could fix anything. A broken chair, a leaking sink, my bicycle, even the old radio in our kitchen. Whenever something stopped working, my father would kneel down, look at it carefully and say, "Give me a minute." I believed him. I believed my father could fix anything, including me. When I was 7, I fell off my bicycle and scraped my knee badly. I ran home crying. My father was sitting on the porch. He looked at my knee and said, "Come here." I climbed onto the step beside him. He cleaned the cut, put a small bandage over it, and told me something I never forgot. Pain feels big when you're little, but you are stronger than you think. I smiled through my tears. Really? Really? Then he tapped the bandage. You're going to be fine. For years I believed that was who my father was. My protector. My safe place. As I got older, things changed. I became more independent. I started asking questions. I wanted to study. I wanted to work. I wanted to make choices for myself. My father did not always understand that. He believed daughters should stay close to home. He thought stability was more important than dreams. When I told him I wanted to go to college in another city, he shook his head. Why do you need to go that far? Because they have the program I want. There are schools here. They don't have the same program. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, "You always want something different." I remember feeling hurt. At the time I did not understand why. I thought wanting more from life meant I was disappointing him. So I learned to be careful around him. I learned which subjects made him uncomfortable. I learned when to stay quiet. And slowly our relationship became more formal. I still loved him. But I stopped telling him everything. Then I met Daniel. I was 27. I had just started a new job and was still trying to understand what I wanted from life. Daniel worked in the same building. We did not fall in love immediately. It was slower than that. He noticed small things, like how I always forgot to eat lunch when I was busy, or how I rubbed my hands together whenever I was nervous, or how I became quiet when something was bothering me. One evening we stayed late at work because of a project. When we finally left the building, it was raining. I stood outside without an umbrella. Daniel looked at me. "You didn't bring one?" I shook my head. He smiled. "Of course you didn't." He opened his umbrella. "Come on." We walked to the bus stop together. The rain was soft. The street was almost empty. And somehow that simple walk became the beginning of everything. Daniel was patient with me. He never tried to change me. When I talked about my father, he listened. One night I told him, "My dad and I aren't as close as we used to be." Daniel asked, "Do you want to be?" "Yes." "Then maybe you should tell him." "I don't know how." Daniel smiled. "You don't have to make it perfect." That was Daniel. He made difficult things sound simple. After 2 years together, he proposed. He did not do it in a restaurant. He did not arrange a huge surprise. He took me to the little park where we had our first proper conversation. Then he held my hand and said, "Emily, I don't want a perfect life. I just want a life with you." I cried. Then I said yes. When I told my parents, my mother hugged me immediately. My father stood quietly. He shook Daniel's hand. "Take care of her." Daniel smiled. "I will." For a while I thought everything was going to be okay. I thought my wedding might bring my father and me closer again. I imagined him helping me choose things. I imagined him giving me advice. I imagined him walking me down the aisle. And when I finally asked him, he said yes. Of course he said yes. At least that was what I believed. Planning a wedding is strange. You spend months thinking about one day. You choose flowers. You choose food. You choose music. You argue over small details. You make lists. You cross things off. And all the while, you imagine how everyone will feel when that day finally comes. For me, the most important detail was not the flowers. It was not the dress. It was not even the venue. It was my father. One Sunday afternoon, I went to my parents' house. My mother was making tea. My father was sitting in his usual chair near the window. I stood in the doorway for a moment. "Dad." He looked up. "Yes. I wanted to ask you something." He put down his newspaper. "What?" I smiled nervously. "Will you walk me down the aisle?" He looked surprised. Then he smiled. It was one of the few times I had seen that old smile again. "The aisle." I laughed. "Yes." He shook his head. "You're still my little girl." My eyes filled with tears. "So that's a yes?" He nodded. "Of course." I walked over and hugged him. He seemed stiff at first. Then he placed his hand on my back. For a few seconds I felt like I was 7 again. Safe. Loved. Protected. I remember going home that evening and telling Daniel. He said yes. Daniel smiled. I knew he would. "I think this wedding is going to bring us closer." Daniel did not answer immediately. Then he said, "I hope so." I looked at him. "What does that mean?" "Nothing bad." He squeezed my hand. "I just want you to be happy." I did not think much of it. I should have. Over the next few months my father became distant again. When I called, he rarely answered. When I visited, he always seemed busy. Whenever I mentioned wedding plans, he changed the subject. My mother noticed. One evening she called me. "Emily, don't worry about your father." I was quiet. "Why would you say that?" "Because I know you're thinking about him." I sighed. "Is he okay?" "He's fine." "Then why is he acting strange?" My mother paused. "I think he has his own feelings about the wedding." "What feelings?" "I don't know." I could tell she knew more than she was saying. "Mom, I don't want to get between you two." That sentence stayed with me. I began to worry. A few weeks later my father asked me to come over. I thought maybe he wanted to talk about the wedding. Instead he asked me to sit down. "I heard you're planning to keep your own last name." I stared at him. "Yes." "Why?" "Because I like my name." He frowned. "You're getting married." "I know." "Then why keep your father's name?" I did not know what to say. Seemed like such a small thing. But it suddenly felt important. "I just want to make my own choice." He looked away. "You've always wanted everything your own way." I felt something inside me sink. "Dad, this isn't about you." He stood. "I think that's the problem." I left shortly after. In the car I cried. Not because of the name. Because I realized that my father was not seeing my wedding as the beginning of my life. He was seeing it as the end of his control over me. Daniel held me that night. "Maybe he just needs time." I nodded. "I hope so." And for the next few weeks I tried to believe that. I tried to believe that my father loved me enough to put his feelings aside. I tried to believe that the promise he made would mean something. I was wrong. The closer we got to the wedding, the more distant my father became. He stopped asking about the plans. He stopped asking about Daniel. When relatives mentioned the wedding, he would simply say, "We'll see." My mother became nervous. One afternoon she came to my apartment. She sat at the kitchen table and held her cup of tea with both hands. "Your father is upset." I looked at her. "About what?" She hesitated. "Many things." "Like what?" She sighed. "He thinks you're leaving the family." I shook my head. "Getting married doesn't mean I'm leaving." "I know." "Does he?" She looked down. "I don't think he knows how to say what he feels." That was the problem. My father had never been good with emotions. When he was proud, he rarely said it. When he was hurt, he became cold. When he was afraid, he became angry. And when he felt he was losing someone, he pushed them away. I began to understand that. But understanding someone does not make their actions hurt less. 2 weeks before the wedding, Daniel and I went to my parents' house for dinner. My father barely spoke. My mother tried to keep the conversation normal. She asked about the flowers. She asked about the cake. She asked whether the photographer had been confirmed. Then my father suddenly said, "How long are you planning to stay in this town after the wedding?" Daniel looked at me. I answered, "We haven't decided." My father nodded. "Of course." "What does that mean?" I asked. "Nothing." Dad. He put down his fork. I just think people should remember where they come from. I felt my face become warm. I haven't forgotten. You're changing. Everyone changes. He looked at Daniel. Not everyone. The table became silent. Daniel did not respond. My mother quietly placed her hand over mine. After dinner I went outside. My father followed me. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then I asked, "Do you still want to walk me down the aisle?" He looked at me. "Yes." "Are you sure?" "Yes. Because you've been acting like you don't want to be there." He sighed. "I'll be there." I nodded. "Okay." He walked back inside. I stayed outside for another minute. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. The night before the wedding, I stayed at my mother's house. Daniel was staying somewhere else according to tradition. I lay in my old bedroom. The walls still had a few marks from when I was a teenager. There was a small shelf where my childhood books had once been. I stared at the ceiling. My mother came in. "Can't sleep?" I smiled. "No." She sat beside me. "Are you happy?" "Yes." "Then that's all that matters." I looked at her. "Mom." "Yes." "Do you think Dad will really come?" She became quiet. Then she said, "Your father loves you." That was not the answer I needed. I needed her to say yes. Instead she kissed my forehead. "Try to sleep." After she left I cried quietly. Not because I was unhappy. Because I was afraid. I was afraid that my wedding day would reveal something I had spent years refusing to see. The next morning everything moved quickly. Hair, makeup, dress, shoes, flowers, photographs, people talking, doors opening and closing. My mother moved around the room like she was trying to keep herself busy. I looked at the clock. 8:45. 9 o'clock. 9:10. My father had not called. I kept telling myself he was getting ready. Then my phone rang. 9:17. "Dad." I answered. "Hi." Silence. "Dad." He breathed out slowly. "I need to tell you something." My stomach tightened. "What?" "I'm not coming." I looked at my mother. She knew immediately. "Not coming where?" I asked even though I already knew. "The wedding." I stood up. "Dad, what are you talking about?" "I can't do it." "You promised me." "I know." "You promised." "I know, Emily." My voice became softer. "Please don't do this." He was silent. Then he said, "I don't think this is my place anymore." "What does that mean?" "You're starting your own family." I closed my eyes. "You're still my father." "I know." "Then please come." "I can't." "Dad, I need you." There was another silence. Then he said, "You'll be fine." That sentence broke something inside me. Not because he was telling me I would survive. Because he was using survival as an excuse not to stay. "Please," I whispered. "I'm sorry." The call ended. I stared at my phone. My mother walked toward me. "What happened?" I could barely speak. "He's not coming." She closed her eyes. Then she sat down. For a moment the room was completely silent. My mother started crying. I had never seen her cry like that. I hugged her. "Mom, I'm sorry. You don't have to apologize." "I should have known." "No. I should have talked to him." "This isn't your fault." She looked at me. "Your father doesn't know how to lose things without pushing them away." I wiped her tears. Then I heard a knock. It was one of the wedding coordinators. "Emily, we're almost ready." I looked at myself in the mirror. My dress was beautiful. My hair was done. My veil was in place. But I felt empty. I whispered to myself, "You can do this." Then someone else knocked. It was my mother's brother. My Uncle James. He had been sitting downstairs with the family. He came into the room slowly. He looked at my mother. Then he looked at me. He did not ask what happened. He already knew. He walked closer. Then he said something I will remember for the rest of my life. "Emily, if your father won't walk with you, let me." I stared at him. "Uncle James, you don't have to walk into that room alone." I started crying. He held out his arm. "Come on, sweetheart." I looked at his arm. Then I looked at my mother. She nodded. And in that moment I understood something. My father had made a choice, but I still had one to make. I could spend the rest of my wedding day grieving the man who refused to stand beside me, or I could honor the people who did. I took Uncle James's arm. Okay. He smiled. That's my girl. The music started. The doors were closed. I stood behind them with Uncle James. My hands were shaking. I'm scared, I whispered. He looked at me. Of what? I don't know. He smiled gently. You're not walking into a courtroom. I laughed through my tears. No. You're walking toward the person you love. I nodded. Then he said, look at me. I did. Your father made his decision this morning. I swallowed. But don't let his decision decide what this day means to you. Those words stayed with me. The doors opened. Everyone stood. I could see Daniel at the front. His face changed when he saw me. His eyes filled with tears. He looked at Uncle James, then back at me, and he smiled. We started walking. Slowly. One step at a time. I felt every pair of eyes in the room, but I did not look at them. I looked at Daniel. Halfway down the aisle I whispered, I'm sorry. He whispered back, for what? My dad. Daniel shook his head. Don't. Then he smiled. Today is ours. I nodded. When we reached the front, Uncle James squeezed my hand. You're okay, he whispered. Then he turned to Daniel. Take care of her. Daniel smiled. I will. Uncle James stepped away. I watched him sit down. My eyes filled with tears again. The ceremony began, but I barely remember the words. What I remember is Daniel holding my hand. What I remember is my mother's face. What I remember is Uncle James sitting where my father should have been. And what I remember most is how the empty space stopped feeling empty, because love had filled it. After the ceremony there were photographs. There was laughter. There was food. There was music. People congratulated us. For a while I almost forgot. Then I saw an empty chair. My father's chair. Someone had left it near the side of the room. I stared at it. Daniel came beside me. You okay? I nodded. I think so. He took my hand. You don't have to pretend. I know. I wish he had come. So do I. Daniel looked at me. But I'm proud of you. That night when we finally left the reception I cried in the car. Not loudly. Just quietly. Daniel held my hand. I keep thinking he might call. He might. What if he does? You don't have to decide tonight. I leaned my head against the window. The rain had started again. It reminded me of the morning. The same rain. The same sky. But I was not the same person anymore. My father did not call the next day. Or the day after that. For 2 weeks there was nothing. My mother called me every evening. She tried to act normal. She asked what we had eaten. She asked how the honeymoon was. She asked whether the new apartment was comfortable. But eventually she said what we were both thinking. He regrets it. I was quiet. How do you know? He told me. I sat down. What did he say? He said he wishes he had gone. I closed my eyes. Then why didn't he? He's embarrassed. I almost laughed. He should be. My mother sighed. I know. I had spent my whole life protecting my father's feelings. For the first time I did not want to. I wanted him to understand what he had done. A few days later he sent me a message. Hope you're doing well. I stared at it. That was all. No apology. No explanation. Just those 4 words. I showed Daniel. He read it. What do you want to say? I don't know. You don't have to answer. I thought about it. Then I wrote. I am doing well. I wish you had been there. I sent it. He replied 3 hours later. I'm sorry. I stared at those 2 words. They were small, but they were something. I did not answer. Not yet. Weeks passed. Then months. I started building my new life. Daniel and I moved into a small house. It wasn't perfect. The kitchen was tiny. The bedroom window stuck when it rained. The living room had one old sofa we bought secondhand. But it was ours. And slowly, I began to understand that my life could be good without my father's approval. That realization was painful, because I had spent years believing I needed his approval to feel worthy. I didn't. I had to learn that. 6 months after the wedding, I visited my mother. My father was sitting in the living room. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then he stood. Hi. Hi. He looked older. Not physically. Emotionally. Like a man who had been carrying something heavy for too long. My mother went into the kitchen. She gave us privacy. My father looked at me. I watched the wedding video. I did not know what to say. I saw James walking with you. I nodded. I was happy for you. I looked at him. Were you? Yes. Then why weren't you there? He looked down. I was angry. At me. At myself. That surprised me. He sat down. I thought if you married Daniel I'd lose you. You were already losing me. He nodded. I know. I wanted you to be part of my life. I know. Then why did you make me feel like choosing my own life was betraying you? He rubbed his hands together. I don't know. I sat across from him. For the first time I saw something in his face I had never seen before. Fear. Not anger. Not pride. Fear. I didn't know how to be your father when you became an adult, he said. My eyes filled with tears. I needed you to learn. I know. You taught me how to ride a bike. He smiled sadly. I remember. You taught me how to fix things. I remember. But you never taught me how to leave. He looked at me. What do you mean? How to grow up without you feeling like I was abandoning you. He lowered his head. I cried quietly. I didn't leave you, Dad. I know. I got married. I know. I still needed you. He wiped his eyes. I should have been there. Yes. I should have walked you down that aisle. Yes. I was wrong. I nodded. I know. He looked at me. Can you forgive me? That was the hardest question. Because forgiveness is not the same as forgetting. And it is not the same as pretending something never happened. I took a breath. I can try. He nodded. That is enough. Things did not become perfect overnight. My father did not suddenly become warm and emotional. He was still himself. Quiet. Serious. Sometimes stubborn. But he began trying. He came to our house more often. He helped Daniel fix a shelf. He brought groceries for my mother. He asked about my work. He even started calling me without a reason. One Saturday morning my phone rang. Hello. It was my father. What are you doing? Nothing. Good. I laughed. Why? I made too much soup. I smiled. Dad, are you inviting me over? Yes. That sounds like an invitation. It is. I went. We ate soup at the kitchen table. It was simple. But I remember that meal more clearly than many expensive dinners. Because there was no pressure. No argument. No need to prove anything. Just family. One day Uncle James came over too. My father shook his hand. Thank you, he said. James looked confused. For what? For walking with Emily. James smiled. She needed someone. My father nodded. I know. Then he looked at me. I wish it had been me. I smiled sadly. I know. And that was enough. Not every wound needs a dramatic ending. Sometimes healing begins with two people admitting what happened. For years I thought my father was the villain of my story. Then I realized he was a human being who made a painful mistake. That does not excuse what he did. It does not erase the morning when he called me and said he was not coming. It does not erase the empty chair. It does not erase the moment I walked down that aisle without him. But understanding him helped me stop carrying the anger. My father had spent his whole life believing that being strong meant never showing fear. He thought fathers were supposed to provide, protect, control, decide. He never learned that sometimes a daughter does not need her father to make decisions for her. She simply needs him to stand beside her while she makes her own. I think that was his biggest mistake. He thought my independence meant I no longer needed him. He did not understand that growing up does not mean stopping needing love. It means needing a different kind of love. When I was 7, I needed my father to hold my bicycle. At 31, I needed him to let go of the bicycle, but still stand nearby. He didn't understand that. Not until it was almost too late. 2 years after my wedding, Daniel and I renewed our vows. It was not a big ceremony. Just family. Few friends. A small garden. some flowers. And this time my father was there. When I saw him standing near the entrance, I almost cried. He looked nervous. My mother whispered, "He's been practicing his speech for 3 days." I laughed. My father came toward me. "I have something for you." He handed me a small box. Inside was an old photograph. It was me at 7 years old sitting on my bicycle. My father was standing behind me. His hand was on the seat. I looked at the picture. "You kept this?" "Of course." I smiled. He looked at me. "I think I finally understand." "Understand what?" He pointed at the picture. I was holding on too tightly. I looked at him. He continued, "I thought if I let go you'd fall." I smiled through tears. "But you didn't." He shook his head. "You learned to ride." Then he paused. "And I should have learned to walk beside you." I hugged him. For the first time in years, I felt no sadness when I held my father. Only peace. People sometimes ask me what I remember most about my wedding day. Some expect me to say the dress, or the flowers, or the ceremony, or the first dance. But that is not what I remember. I remember a phone call. I remember my father's voice. "I'm not coming." I remember my mother's tears. I remember standing behind those wedding doors, wondering if I could walk into the room alone. And then I remember Uncle James holding out his arm. "Let me walk with you." That moment changed me. At first, I thought someone had taken my father's place. But now I understand that nobody really replaced him. Uncle James did something different. He reminded me that love does not always come from the person we expect. Sometimes it comes from an uncle. Sometimes from a mother. Sometimes from a friend. Sometimes from the person who quietly sits beside us when everyone else has gone home. And sometimes the person who hurts us is also capable of learning from the pain they caused. My father did not become a perfect man. I did not become a perfect daughter. Our relationship still has difficult moments. But we learned something important. Family is not only about being present when things are easy. Family is about showing up when someone needs you. I used to think my wedding day was ruined because my father did not walk me down the aisle. Now I see it differently. My wedding day taught me that I was loved. Not in the way I had imagined, but in a way I needed. When those doors opened, I was not alone. Someone took my arm. Someone walked beside me. Someone looked at me and reminded me that I was worth showing up for. And years later, when I think about that rainy morning, I no longer remember the empty chair first. I remember the hand that reached for mine. I remember Daniel waiting for me. I remember my mother smiling through her tears. And I remember Uncle James whispering, "You're not walking in there alone." Sometimes life does not give us the moment we imagined. Sometimes the person we expected to stand beside us chooses to step away. And when that happens, it can feel like the whole world has changed. But sometimes another door opens. Another hand reaches out. Another person reminds us that our worth was never dependent on someone else's choice. My father walked away that morning. Someone else took his place. And strangely enough, that painful moment taught me one of the most beautiful lessons of my life. You cannot always choose who gives you life. But you can choose who you allow to stand beside you. You can choose who you trust. You can choose who you forgive. And most importantly, you can choose to keep moving forward. That is what I did. I walked down that aisle. I married the man I loved. I built a life of my own. And eventually, I found a way to forgive my father without forgetting what happened. Because forgiveness did not mean saying, "It didn't hurt." It meant saying, "It hurt, but it will not control the rest of my life." Today, when I see my father sitting at our family table, I sometimes think about that little girl on the bicycle. She was waiting for someone to hold the seat. She was afraid to fall. And her father was standing behind her. Then one day he let go. She kept riding. Maybe that is what growing up really means. Not that we stop loving our parents. Not that we stop needing them, but that we learn to keep moving when they cannot walk beside us. And if we are lucky, they learn to catch up. My father did. Took him time. Took me forgiveness. And it took both of us accepting that love is not about holding someone in place. Love is about letting them become who they are. And still being willing to walk beside them. So if you have ever been disappointed by someone you thought would always be there, remember this. Their absence does not make you unworthy. Their choice does not define your value. And sometimes the person who steps forward when someone else steps away becomes the reason you discover just how loved you really are. My father did not walk me down the aisle. But I was not alone. Someone better took his place that day. Not because he was a better father, but because, in that moment, he was willing to be there. And sometimes being there is the greatest gift anyone can give. That is the part of my wedding day I will always remember. Not the person who walked away, but the person who stayed. And I think after all these years that is what family is supposed to mean.